Okay, picture this. It's early 2026. One of the biggest, most stable economies in the world is facing an absolutely terrifying choice. We're talking about their national treasure, the very foundation of their wealth, and it's trapped thousands of miles from home. And, well, the clock is ticking.
In this quote, it just nails the problem. What was supposed to be a simple financial safety net has turned into a political weapon. Berlin is suddenly realizing that its ultimate insurance policy might actually be a gun pointed right back at them.
So to really get a handle on how serious this is, we've got to talk about the sheer scale of what's at risk here. I mean, we're talking about an amount of wealth that can literally change the fate of entire nations. 3,351 tons. That is the total size of Germany's entire gold reserve. And just so you know, that makes it the second largest stockpile on the whole planet, right behind the United States. This is not just a pile of shiny metal. This is the ultimate guarantee of the German economy.
But here's where it gets really interesting. A huge chunk of that gold, 1,236 tons of it, isn't even in Germany. Nope, it's sitting deep in the vaults of the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. It's been there for decades, a holdover from the Cold War to keep it safe from the Soviets.
And this chart really just lays out the problem perfectly. A massive 37% of Germany's ultimate financial security blanket is sitting on foreign soil, totally under the control of another government.
And what's it worth? Well, the number is just mind-boggling. We're talking over 164 billion euros. And with gold prices in 2026 going through the roof, that number is getting bigger every single day. This isn't just money. It's the kind of treasure that could shift the entire economic balance of Europe.
So, you have to ask, how did a security arrangement that's been in place for decades suddenly become this source of massive anxiety? Well, the answer really comes down to a huge and pretty hostile shift in how the world works. Look, the world has just completely changed. What used to be a symbol of trust between allies has now become this major vulnerability. The country that was once the protector is now a rival, and all that talk of partnership, it's been replaced with talk of economic threats.
And the threats coming from the Trump administration in this 2026 scenario have been pretty blunt. We're talking about crippling 20% tariffs aimed right at the heart of Germany's economy, its car industry. And then there are the whispers about linking access to foreign assets with, playing ball on trade deals. And that's the real kicker here. This is about so much more than just tariffs. The big fear in Berlin is that the US will weaponize its control over Germany's own money, maybe freezing it or holding it hostage to win a trade dispute, whether that's about cars or even something like resources in the Arctic. The trust that the US is just a neutral banker, it has totally collapsed.
So all of this leaves the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz with a totally impossible choice. It's a real high-stakes gamble where, honestly, every single move he could make is loaded with catastrophic risk.
So what do we mean when we say press the button? We're talking about repatriation, formally demanding that all 1,236 tons of gold be shipped back home to Germany. Now, it sounds simple, right? But in the world of geopolitics, an act like that is a massive deal, with potentially earth-shattering consequences.
And here is the brutal choice he's facing. On one hand, Merz can just leave the gold in New York and cross his fingers that it isn't used against him. Or, on the other hand, he can demand it back, an action that Washington would almost certainly see as an act of economic war. That could trigger massive retaliation and maybe even destroy the entire 75-year-old alliance.
All right, so let's just play this out for a second. What would actually happen if Germany decides it's just too risky to wait any longer and they press that big red button? Well, the fallout would be nothing short of a global financial earthquake.
It would kick off an immediate chain reaction. First, trust in the U.S. as the world's bank would just evaporate overnight. All the other countries with gold stored in New York would start to panic, creating a massive run on the Fed's vaults. Washington would, of course, probably hit back with sanctions, and Europe? They'd be forced to create their own independent financial system, basically splitting the world into two hostile economic camps.
So, this decision wouldn't just be a financial transaction. It would be a huge statement. It would signal the definitive end of the financial system that's been in place since World War II, and it would be the start of a much more chaotic and fractured new world order.
And that leaves us with the multi-billion-euro question, right? In this crazy game of geopolitical chicken, somebody has to swerve. The real question isn't just if Germany will press that button, it's what happens to the rest of us when they do.